Hello everyone, this is Vinay here from Learn Coding with Vinay. In this video, we are going to discuss another important topic of MS SQL, which is autocolumns. Now, what are these autocolumns? Now, autocolumns are the columns where user does not need to send the values for these columns. The values of these columns are generated automatically by database engine itself. And in MS SQL, we have four such options. Right? Using identity, sequence and GUID. In GUID we have two options: randomly generated GUIDs and sequentially generated GUID. Let's see them one by one. Right. So let's take first example of identity. So I have created one table called employee identity, and which has two columns, ID and name. ID is marked as integer and identity. This 1 comma 1 indicates that it should start with 1, and for every time it should be incremented by 1. Right. So first value would be 1, second would be 2, next would be third, like so. It will continue till the max size of this data type. Right. So let's and this is how your insert statement looks like when you have an when you have a column marked as identity. Right. So if you see closely this, that it says insert into table name, then there is column name. So we have not specified ID over here. So user does not need to specify the column which is marked as identity. The value of that column will be generated automatically by the database engine itself. Right. So that's why we see only one column name over here and the value. So let me go ahead and execute this. So it says on row affected. Okay. And let me go ahead and see the records. So we have one record called Learn Coding with Vinay. Right. So ideally, to to explain this topic, I have already inserted 10,000 record with the same data in each of these table that we are going to discuss in this topic. Right. So that's why currently it is showing this many records. Right. So this is how you can declare an identity column, and this is how you can insert it. You no need to pass it into the column list, and at the same time you no need to pass the value also. Right. So this is the first option. Second option is the sequence. Right. So just like identity, with sequence also we can mark from where it should start, from where it should uh, by what number we should increment it. It's kind of similar, only the syntax is different. Right. So it says create sequence, then the name of the sequence, then the start with and increment by number. Right. So again it will start with 1, and the next value will be 2, and next value will be 3, and it will continue till the either the max value we have defined or the max value of that data type what we have used. Right. And here is a table that uses actually sequence number as ID column. Right. So here the table is employee seq, employee sec, and again it has two column only, ID and name. Right. And this is how a insert statement looks like, where we have a column that is using sequence value. Right. So here we are saying insert into table name, ID, name, basically list of columns, all columns over here, and then the values. And how to read the sequence value? We'll have to write next value for the sequence name. Right. So here it is. It will bring the next value of from this sequence, put it over here, and then insert the record. So let's see what it is, how it works. So let me go ahead and fire this query. It says one row affected. If I go ahead and run a query on this table, which is employee sec, then I have this record inserted right over here, and then value generated was 10,002. Right. So this is how you can insert a record into the database table where we are using sequence for a column. Right. We can see the current value of sequence by using this query: select current value from sys.sequences, where in the where query we can specify name as whatever our sequence name is. So if I go ahead and run this, it will give us 10,002, right? Because that was the last value generated. So currently our sequence is stuck at 10,002 value, right? So now, having said this, we have two options where we can use auto generated numbers right? Identity and sequence. But what are the differences between these two, right? So the first is identity is actually a columns attributes, right? And sequence is an independent database object. So let's understand it. What does this means, right? So if I go ahead and go to employee table definition, if I just right click on id column and say property, then we can see that column attribute over here, that it is mark identity true. Basically this column is an identity column, so it will be incremented automatically based on the definition what we have defined, right? While sequence is an independent database object, just like your table, store procedure, views, right? We can see it over here into programmability sequences, and this is our sequence, right? So this is basically an independent database object. We can also treat sequence as a single table, single column, single row table, right? Because at the time it will hold only one value, which is current value. That's what we just saw, right? If I go ahead and run this again, so we'll see 10,002. So basically it will hold only one value at a time, but it's an independent database object. That's what the point is over here is, right? So that was the first point. Now second point. Now second point is actually identity is closely associated with a table, right? With a single table, right? Sequence, we can plan to have a sequence that can be shared across multiple tables, right? That is the second difference. Now identity, we must have seen, identity column generally used as a primary key because it is a prime candidate one where we need a data, we need a row identifier that is incremented one by one, right? So identity is generally a primary choice for declaring primary key. We can use sequence also for the primary keys, but we will have to be little careful while using sequence. Why? Because we cannot update identity value, so we are safe when we are using identity as a primary key. But with sequence we can still update the value of the that column. Let's take an example so we'll understand it better. So over here, let me you know try to update let me try to update identity table, and let me change its value with id values with 10,000 to say some 1 lakh. Say if I go ahead and run this, it says cannot update identity column, right? It will restrict me from the updation, right? But if I go ahead and update the employee sec table where id is actually not an identity, it is using sequence, right? Then it will allow me to update this. As of now it goes 0 rows affected because I'll have already changed this. Let me make this 0 over here and this one over here. So let's try this again. So it says one row affected. Let me go ahead and see the sequence table, what we have in sequence table, right? So just check this out. This is 1 lakh, not 10,000, right? So while you can use sequence as a primary column, but you will have to be little cautious, or you will have to be you will have to put down extra validations, extra restrictions on your table so that no one can update that key value, right? That's one actually disadvantage of SQL sequence, right? However, there is an advantage also of using sequence, right? So what is that advantage? That with sequence we can actually recycle our values, right? So for identity it will be 1 2 3 4 5 6 up to the max value, right? But with sequence we can recycle the sequence value. For example, if you see this definition, right? Create sequence name starts with 1, increment by 1, minimum value 1, maximum value 5, and we have used cycle. So what this will do, whenever we try to retrieve the value of next value for this sequence, it will start from, basically if we are doing it for the first time, it will start from 1, next will be 2, then 3, then 4 and 5, and then the next time we'll again fire this query, it will come back again to 1. So let's see that in action. So here we have 1, I'm firing second time, 3 4 5. Now if I go ahead and fire this query, it should ideally come back to 1 again. See, it came back to 1 again, right? So if you have a scenario where you have, where you want to have number values generated on a repeated basis, right? So their sequence will become your ideal choice. For example, few examples are, let's say we go to a clinic, right? So when we go to clinic, we go to the doctor. Many clinic will have that system in that they will give us the token number for the patient, right? And doctor will treat or examine that patient based on the token number only, right? So basically we will be sitting outside with token number in hand. Whenever our number or name is shouted out by the staff, we will go to doctor's cabin and we will will be examined by the doctor, right? So that is so for daily patient number we can use sequence over there, right? Because that numbers has to be generated on a daily basis, one to whatever the number of patients are, right? So it has to be daily refreshed. On a daily basis it should start from 1, right? Another similar example is movie tickets. For movie tickets we don't need to start from first and then go ahead with the max numbers. No, every day we can refresh it, right? Because every day will be a different, so a different number of people coming in, right? So movie ticket is another example where we can use sequence number, right? Okay, so one more example on a similar line would be if you have visited some government offices in India. Right. So there are certain quotas of of their services. Right. So basically, I remember I had to visit a nearby municipal office for the Aadhaar card update. Right. So on a daily basis, they only welcome 30 citizens, and they will only take they'll print out only 30 form, and they'll give that 30 form to the 30 whoever first 30 are people. Right. So on a daily basis they are refreshing that number, they are regenerating that form 1 to 30. So that is another case where we can use sequence, right? So I hope you have good idea about identity and sequence. Let's now go ahead, let's now move ahead with the GUID column examples, right? So in GUID we have two options, right? Either we can generate the GUID randomly or we can generate the GUID sequentially, right? So for random we will have to use new id. For sequential we will have to use it as a default definition, new sequential id only. Here we still have the option, if we have not specified default new id we can specify it over here, but currently I have used it as a default only. And so here we have employee GUID random table example, which has again two columns, id and name, right? And this is how its insert statement will look like, right? So here since we have written in default, we don't need to specify id column in insert statement, it will be just name. If I go ahead and run this, you know then and if I go ahead and check this, if I go to end of this, right? So that record got inserted and some GUID is generated, right? So let me take out the GUID over here for your reference, right? So it's basically a 36 character string or maybe alphanumeric string, whatever is that, right? So this is generated by database engine and we have no idea what would be the next value of this, right? Now similar way there is another option that we can use sequential GUID, right? Now this is an example of sequential GUID, which the table name is employee GUID sequential. We have two columns, id and name, right? And this is how an insert statement will look like for a table that uses sequential GUID, right? Again, we are not specifying id because that will be generated by database engine itself. We are only passing the other column values, right? So let me go ahead and execute this. So it got executed. Let's examine the record in database table, right? So we have that record as our last record, right? Now let me bring out few values from here. Check this, check these values, they up to a certain character they will look like same, but they will be different, right, after some time. So random, with random GUID, actually there will be very random generation of GUID. We won't be able to predict the next value. Even with the sequential GUID, we won't be able to predict the next value, but we can see some sort of sequence is there, right? However, we won't be able to predict it also, right? So these two options are there with us, right? Now, what are the GUID options? I mean, what are the scenarios where we should use GUID, not the auto numbers, right? So first thing, let's say we don't want a column that is getting incremented one by one. We just need uniqueness, right? So if we just need uniqueness, we can use either random GUID or sequential GUID. The example are, let's say we have a document upload functionality in either a web or a mobile application, right? So let's say a profile picture, right? So if I am uploading my profile picture, there are good chances that I'll just give that file name as my profile picture.jpg. Someone else can also upload, same profile picture with the same name, right? So what will happen if we use if we have developed the functionality in such a way that it will be, uploaded document or uploaded image will be stored on some file server or on cloud, and if there is any existing file, so either it will restrict us to upload the new file, or it will overwrite the existing file, right? So both cases are very dangerous actually, right? So to avoid this, it is always better that while uploading the file or uploading the document, rename the file to some this GUID, auto generated GUID, so that your existing documents and your new documents, there are no conflicts, right? They both will be maintained on that either file server or on cloud, right? So that is a case where you can use GUID, right? Another example of GUID, would be, if you have noticed, a lot of institute, running online, either they are running online or either they are running offline. At the end of the course, or at the end of the training, they will generate some sort of certificate, right? And that certificate, if you have noticed, that will have a GUID down over somewhere. So that will indicate, that okay, this GUID belongs to this, basically certificate belongs to certain candidate. So no one can duplicate actually the certificate, right? So that is another use case where you can use GUID, right? Okay. So now I hope this have given you, a good indication where you should use the GUIDs and where you should use the numbers auto columns, right? But now let's compare then, what is the difference between, auto generated number column and auto generated GUIDs, right? So the first difference is, the numbers will require only 4 byte to store, while GUIDs will require 16 bytes to store. So in this case, there will be definitely difference between a storage of same value of a number and same value of a GUID. So that is the reason I have, to demonstrate that only, I have inserted 10,000 record in each of these table with the same values, right? So if we go ahead now, let me go ahead and run these, right? So if you can see, I have a table employee identity which has 1001 rows, right? And this 1001 rows has total occupied 272 kilobytes, right? And unused is 48 kilobytes. Now let me run this again. It has 1001 rows, unused are 48, but reserved were, look at the reserved one, 456, and out of 456, 400 KB was used, right? In the previous one, only 328 KB were used, sorry, only 272 KB was used, right? So there is a difference in storing a number and storing a GUID, right? First thing is that, so GUIDs require more spaces, that's the bottom line over here, right? Now since GUID requires more space, definitely the record retrieval will also take more time than the numbers. So let's see that in Excel. So let me, just comment out this. Let's see this. Let me just comment out all this where condition, and let me run this 4 query all together in one go. And let me, put down include plan, execution plan also, right? So if I go ahead in the execution plan itself, then see, select star from employee identity table, right? It took 22% of the overall execution cost, query cost, right? Then the random GUID took 28%, sequence took 22%, and sequential GUID took 28%. So basically GUIDs are taking more time to get executed. So basically a table, if we are firing the same query, a table with identity column or sequence column, and it will run a little faster than the table with a GUID columns, right? Now let's just take one record example. So if I go ahead and uncomment this, so let me run this both query together. And if I go to execution plan, oh no, let me actually run this query one by one, right? So if I go to execution, if I go to, if I hover my mouse on this table scan, and if I notice, estimated IO cost, which is I think ninth of from top to bottom, it is the ninth element in this list, then it is 0.02764779. Remember, 0.027, right? And if I go ahead and run this and go to execution plan, hover my mouse over here, and now estimated IO cost is 0.039. It's almost 0.04. So actually it is greater than the IO cost is greater than the IO cost of number. So point over here is, whenever you are using an identity and you are querying based out of identity column, that runs little faster than the your GUID columns, right? Because it takes more memory to store, and at the same time it takes more time and more performance to get back the values, because GUIDs are 36 character logs. If we think, in a very, as if we think as a very layman person, right, then the number comparison is always easy than the character comparison, right? So that is the reason identity or sequence, column with identity or sequence will work faster than the column with GUIDs, right? So again, based on the scenario, you should use one of these, either identity, either sequence, either GUIDs, right? Scenarios also I have explained in the video. So I hope you learned something new in this video, and for more such SQL tips and tricks, subscribe to my channel, which is Learn Coding with Vinay dash SQL for Devs. And thanks for watching this video. See you in the next video.